This is on reading Allen Ginsberg's Homework by Andrea Carter Brown. I'm going to go ahead and read it, and then we'll talk about it and see how it responds to or develops or counters or reimagines the central themes of the poem we just read. So this is on reading Allen Ginsberg's Homework by Andrea Carter Brown after an article in the New York Times. It was in the financial section on page 3 below the fold. A huge multinational conglomerate is praised for an, quote, innovative marketing program that washes dirty clothes and linens for free after a disaster. This time it's the tornado that tore through Joplin, but loads of hope began after Katrina. When I think how hard and costly it was to wash everything we didn't throw away after 9/11, my eyes well up. To begin with, no water or electricity. It would be months before new machines arrived to replace those contaminated by dust. Everything in closets, dressers, chests had to be hauled to a distant laundry. The sheer number of quarters it took, the fear that no matter how many wash, rinse, and spin cycles, our clothes would never be clean enough to put against skin. Allergic to perfumes as I became after 9/11, I wanted to breathe in the tide of cleanliness. To be one of the lucky, leaving our filthy belongings with strangers to remove what they can of disaster and return them to us, clean, neatly folded, wrapped in paper, bagged, and tied with a ribbon. Wow, okay. This is a really different poem in many aspects. So I think it's going to be interesting to try to grapple with its relation to the original Ginsberg poem, other than this theme of laundry. Does anybody have any like initial thoughts or reactions that they want to get out there? Mary?
Can I first ask a question? There are some phrases in italics. Is it important that they are in italics? Are these titles, or is it simply what it says?
Yes, these are
like Loads of Hope.
Loads of Hope is what I imagine to be the program launched by the Innovative Marketing Program, right? It's called Loads of Hope. It's launched by this huge multinational conglomerate. Tide is a brand of laundry detergent in the United States.
Okay.
And so she's punning on it here. I want to breathe in the tide of cleanliness. And if anybody remembers the Tide Pod controversy from 3 or 4 years ago, it's that brand Tide. So she's sort of, that's her version of the Ivory soap, I think. It's a sort of name brand of a soap, of a detergent. And yeah, I understood Loads of Hope to be the Innovative Marketing Program. Mary?
Actually, in my neighborhood, like 5 minutes away, there is this park of what they call a disinfection. And this was an industrial zone with plenty of coal from Manchester that used to heat up the textile machinery. And they actually had a laundry or a washing center for all the clothes that people couldn't wash at home. This is the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th, but it went quite up almost to 1950. And you take your laundry from your home or your dirty clothes full of soot and things, and you took them to this disinfecting laundry, which exists now, and you can visit it as a tourist. It no longer functions because people have washing machines. I was very curious because it actually exists right here in this town, this kind of thing. So
that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, she's talking about that. So what you're describing is a sort of old setup, right? And so Andrea Carter Brown is talking about this
something new,
current after 11.
But it's just curious because all the industrial waste and soot, and plus people got tuberculosis a lot, and they had this disinfecting system for the town. And I thought it reminded me of this Loads of Hope and washing up.
That's so interesting. I mean, to think of this, you know, these laundries that are set up, these disinfecting laundries that are set up at the time of coal-fired industrial production to offset what are the obviously like terrible effects of this way of doing production. And to think of that in the sort of 9/11, the post 9/11 context, which is not at all about, she's not talking about like coal-fired factories, right? She's talking about the dust from ground zero, and I'm not really sure where I'm going with this, but just she's in a very like post-industrial setting. It's what I guess I want to say, in the 21st century. Where these kinds of disinfecting practices have been forgotten. Unia?
Yeah, I just wanted to say what my first impression was. Basically, when I read it, I felt, I mean, I think it's rather obvious that she's not just, that she kind of took the natural disaster part that Ginsberg played on and kind of made it into something with social aspects, and like with 9/11 as well, like just other catastrophes aside from things that just go bad in nature. And what really interests me, and also where I'm not sure, is the aspect of irony, because I think it's so difficult, for me at least, to kind of figure out if she really means it, especially like the parts with 9/11. I mean, the part with my eyes well up, I mean, it was a real tragedy, and no one can ever like talk about it in a way that would kind of, I mean, make it less horrific in a way. But the, I mean, like the part with contaminated by dust, I think I read like a bit of irony in there. And I'm not sure what I think about that, or if that is even true. So, yeah.
May I make a comment?
Please.
The first thing I notice is the beginning paragraph is very dismissive of the whole thing that follows. It's in the financial section, so that makes it the corporate, but it's on page 3 below the fold. One, it's not on the front page, it's inside, and then the fold, anything below the fold is a dismissive place. It's important if it's above the fold. So it's interesting for me to see that as the most important thing, or the thing that she starts us looking at.
Your room?
To elaborate on that, it's called an innovative marketing program, right? It's not something that is meant as something really of service, but just something to help the corporation, which is tied, by the way. I just looked it up.
Oh, it is tied. Okay.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
It's tied, loads of hope. So it comes as a surprise that after this first stanza, which is really very dismissive, that she starts out that you see that she's actually really taking it to heart and let it come to her, and she's getting emotional because of it. It was a huge turn. That was unexpected the first time I read it.
And it's very tonally different from the Ginsberg poem, right? Like it's which is not, it doesn't feel emotionally invested really. And this is hyper personal. This is about like
yeah, but it's the kind of laundry that can be done. You know, the Ginsberg poem is the kind of laundry that can't be done because it's the whole world. And this is, you know, one disaster at a time.
That's really fascinating, and it starts to you know, it starts to key us into the way that the metaphor of laundry evolves from the previous poem to this one. as something that actually, she's talking about real laundry, not
Yeah.
it's metaphorical laundry, right? I mean, the laundry has some metaphorical value in this poem as well, but it's not pure metaphor. I wonder. Oh yeah, Jenny.
Well, just going back to what Unia said, the reason that I threw this poem in for us was that when I read it, because I get poem a day and I check nearly all of them in my bin, I read 2 lines and that's the end of it. But this one really spoke to me, and it spoke to me because from far away in the outside, it's been hard for me to think about what Katrina was like for individuals. And in the same way, what other big mass disasters are like for individuals. And I think that starting off with the financial section and then going into the personal section reads really well, because we've got this innovative marketing program, which leads us into what it would have been like if she could have it. And I think she really is thinking back to what it was like, because for me reading this, I think, oh, I never thought of that. I never thought that there'd be no way to do your washing. And when you'd done it, you'd never feel it was clean. And so in a way, I don't see this as a response to homework so much as reading homework and seeing this thing in the financial section. She's looking at real laundry. She's looking at real laundry for the whole world, and then she's looking at real laundry for herself. And she's looking at it in a very different poetical form.
Right.
I think these 3-line things are called tercets, so I'm not very good at the
they are.
kind of a thing. And she hasn't taken Ginsberg's kind of humorous stance. There's this very deep sense of loss to me in this poem. And so I suppose the way in which it feels similar is that I felt that Ginsberg's was a reflection that then got put out to the world, and that the same has happened here. She's been prompted by his poem and by the Loads of Hope to reflect on something which is still very many years later feeling very deep. That she still has, she's still allergic to perfumes.
Right.
After all this time. Other people may disagree with that reading, but that's what I found from it.
No, I think that's really nice, Jenny. Mark,
So,
Mark,
again, we have a strange title. Is it really on reading Allen Ginsberg homework, or is it more on reading an article in the New York Times? I think she should have changed the title and the subtitle, or whatever that is.
Right, on reading an article in the New York Times after Allen Ginsberg's homework. Right. That makes a lot more sense. Stanley, did you have something?
Well, you mentioned this poem was written in 2022.
Yeah.
Published.
Wow. So it's like 40 years later, you know?
Yeah. And
thank you. And I like what Mark just said about
maybe it's also important pointing out that it was written or published on September 12th, so one day after
the anniversary.
The anniversary of 9/11.
It's definitely on the
quite close and in the mood, yes.
So it was just published last month.
Yeah.
Wow, where did you find this, Max?
Jenny suggested it. Jenny found it in the Jenny.
It came out on Poem a Day, and if you subscribe to Poem a Day, a lot of poetry drops into your inbox. Most of it you're not very interested in, but every now and again something comes up that's interesting, and this interested me. It's so easy to ditch the ones I don't want. I keep it for the ones I do want.
Well, I'm glad that you plucked this one out. Vijaya, did you have something to say?
Yeah, I seem to have a very different take on the whole poem. First of all, I find it full of irony that she's talking of Katrina and that conglomerate making laundry. I mean, how would I mean, if you don't have a home, how would laundry matter? I mean, eventually, kind of. And I don't know. And I see something about, I don't know, that perfume took me to the Shakespearean, Macbeth's queen, where she says all the perfumes of Arabia, cannot clean her hands of the blood. So I don't know. I think she's implying that that this mess can't be really washed unless it's like, I mean, how can you? I mean, this is like laundry folded and cleaned and tied up in a ribbon. That's what big corporations do, right? I mean, you just kind of wrap it in a package and give it to you. But then the reality is different. I don't know. I read it as a very ironical poem. Kind of.
I think I tend to agree with that and with the detection of the irony here. I mean, I think it's both, right? I think it's quite profound and personal the way we've been saying, but there's also like it's not like it was in the newspaper and I read about this very kind company like that's doing this really life-changing thing. It's everything is like steeped in like very qualified language. A huge multinational conglomerate is praised for an innovative marketing program, which is in scare quotes. And you kind of get the sense that she's extremely skeptical of it. She's both skeptical, but in some ways she really does seem to mean this at the end. Like, it would have been so great to have had this, and yet she's also seems to be recognizing that there's something like there's still something really suspect, right, about other people cleaning your clothes so they can package them back up, and that's how like you're supposed to that's supposed to help you through this situation or something.
And the huge conglomerate, I was just on NPR yesterday. There was like this, on their Nancy's bookshelf, they had the news, the book reviews, and they were reviewing a book by, I forget the name of the author, but it's on this huge Mackenzie's. It's a huge conglomerate of consulting company.
Right.
How they are not as environmentally, conscious as they claim to be. So it's a book called Mackenzie Comes to Town, When Mackenzie Comes to Town. So I was just thinking like, so, because who's really regulating these huge corporations? They are so beyond, the reach because they have the power and the clout and the money. I mean, I'm too much of a liberal, so I know that's my opinion, but whatever.
Let's go to Kurt, who I think has something to say, and then maybe CJ.
Sure. I can't seem to develop my thought very well, but I did read an article and I thought it was pretty good. And one of the things she said, she talked about how the Onion was making a lawsuit because someone went to jail for writing something. Yeah, someone wrote someone parodied some police, and the police didn't like it, so they found a reason to arrest her. So she was supporting her. So I think one of the interesting things is that she hides the irony and parody a little bit, so that we don't necessarily know that that's what she's doing. But it's a little bit like saying, "Oh, you want it clean? Okay, I'll make it clean for you. There you go. You want it clean? That's what clean is. It's too clean." So it's almost like you don't want to tell it too much, because there's something wrong with. Obviously, one of the big problems with clean is soap itself is an environmental problem.
Right.
Too much soap in the rivers, then it's too clean. So it's a contradiction. So I think the irony that, Yunya mentioned it right from the beginning, and I think that's something interesting, but it's also, you have to analyze how easy the irony is. And I think she makes it very hard because you're not so certain that she's being ironic, but in the end, she has to be. Oh, you want to clean? Tie it up with a ribbon. Good for you.
Right.
How would you want?
That's
So I don't know. I think analyzing the rhetorical value of irony is pretty difficult. I don't have the tools to do it.
Yeah.
I wonder what other people think. So
it looks like Jeroen, CJ and then Jeroen.
Thank you. Clean it, fold it up, wrap it in paper. You live in New York City, you don't have a washer and dryer. To live easily, many people have their clothes washed and clean and neatly folded and wrapped in paper. And they do it every week to have their clothes. And so there's also this realistic form of after 9/11, after you don't have a way to clean up. And one of the things that comes to me is, when you go camping, you just wear the same clothes, the same socks, the same everything for either a weekend or a week. And you never think about it because you're in a more quasi survival mode.
Right.
So it just sets up this irony of what is clean and how Victorian is it to think clean better. And there's actually a kind of jeans that are hip that you never wash. I'm just throwing that as an aside. I was very surprised to learn about that. You don't wash them, that's part of it.
Thanks, CJ. And I think you're sort of unfurling a little bit more of this irony that Kurt was just talking about. Jeroen, did you have something to?
Yeah, I wonder, maybe it's more a question about English idiom. My native language is Dutch, and in Dutch you can say tied with a ribbon, doe er een strik omheen, which means that you are owned by a corporation. Right? So I thought about that with the irony. When you have this innovative marketing program, does it end with you're owned by the company or not? In Dutch, that would be the normal conclusion, with tied with a ribbon on the end. I don't know if that's the same way in English.
Not exactly, unless any of the other native English speakers have a different. I've heard of this before. I don't know of that, but I think that there's something about the tied. I think Joachim is into something that's almost like a little bit off-putting. I think, as we were saying, maybe even menacing about the tied with the ribbon here at the end, right? That she says, how great it would be to have all of these things removed of disaster, or with the disaster removed, and then packaged and tied with a ribbon, right? Like there's something about the detail of the ribbon that feels like so unnecessary and almost like superfluous to the point of being really unsettling. Yunya?
Yeah, I agree. I also kind of took the filthy belongings and like the second to last stanza as more of a metaphor for like maybe the past or ideologies or maybe anything that happened in the past, or any like catastrophes, maybe like 9/11, that maybe the cleaning equals an erasing in a way that you wouldn't want to have looking at historical events, because you need to successfully process them in a way. And I felt like she kind of like had a statement on what people, like on the people that just try to erase everything that happened in the past and move on without talking about it.
And this would be a kind of metaphorical sanitation again, like what we encountered in the Ginsberg poem, that there's a cleaning that feels like sanitizing, like it's and it feels like we're removing something unpleasant. CJ?
Yes, just when you read that, I saw tied up above, italicized, telling the cleaning. There's just this connection with the actual word, and she italicized it, which kind of like yelling, "This is, I want you to get this, I'm making a pun." And I don't think that was needed, the italics, to get the point across, but I just that, yeah.
So is this, oh, Michael, yeah, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I thought tied was putting it there at the end was in a way connecting it in some form to Ginsberg's poem, in the sense that the types of disasters that she's talking about are natural disasters, and that they have their own problems associated with them, which are very similar, perhaps, or maybe not, but to what Ginsberg's talking about, which are more from different governments, countries, that kind of thing, and making it in that sense, tying them together.
So I think you're raising an interesting point here, Michael, that I think leads us into another good topic of conversation, which is what is the problem in this poem versus what we understand to be the problem in the Ginsberg poem. So right, so she's talking about so Andrea Carter Brown here has several problems in mind, them being natural disasters, as you just said, Michael, but also September 11th, which is not a natural disaster, but also what appears to be some kind of profiteering by these multinational, like quasi-sovereign companies in the face of disasters, and also her own a recognition of her own desire almost for what the Tide Company would offer her in the Loads of Hope program, and how, you know, in some ways that would have been a nice thing to have had after September 11th, but also kind of a messed up thing because it wouldn't really, I mean, what help would it have created? So I think there's so many different layers of problem in this poem versus the Ginsberg poem, where the problems, yeah, as you were just saying, they it seems to be the things that like governments are doing or failing to do, right? Like, oh no, we let people, you know, build a pipeline here in Alaska and it exploded, and now like, or, you know, it doesn't, I guess they explode sometimes, but now, you know, now the landscape is just like covered in muck, and so that there's this like this somewhat more pointed idea of the problem in the Ginsberg poem, and a far more diffuse idea of the problem in this poem, I think. I don't know if anybody has any like thoughts about what exactly Andrea Carter Brown, like what does she imagine it? So if Andrea Carter Brown were doing her laundry in this poem, what would she be washing out? Like what is the one thing she'd be trying to get rid of? And obviously it's not just one thing in Ginsberg, but we can kind of reduce it and say it's the contamination of the environment. And there's just like a million different ways that it happens. But what is the problem that Andrea Carter Brown would wash out if it could be washed out the way one washes their laundry? Jeroen?
Well, she has a complete book called September 12th. It looks like she's really kind of, really has some kind of issue. That's not nice. She's kind of traumatized by the 9/11 attacks, and she really wants this way of getting clean again and get rid of the trauma I think.
So the problem is the lingering trauma of being presumably in Manhattan on September 11th, 2001.
Yeah, and she wrote about people that she knew that died and everything. So
right.
it really is something for her.
Oh, ciao, Christy. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on what the so if this poem is diagnosing a problem, to use again another construction we've been using, or another heuristic, Kurt?
I just wanted to suggest maybe this is just eternally pessimistic. Says we want to clean, but in cleaning we can't clean. It's over. And maybe that even goes back to the original Allen Ginsberg. If I were doing my laundry, so well, I ain't going to do my laundry.
Right.
Maybe it's just downright pessimistic. I mean, we have to engage in pessimism sometimes. It's obviously not a very socially acceptable attitude, but I think you have to engage in it once in a while, at least to understand what optimism is. So.
I mean, I totally see that, and I think I probably generally share that impression of this poem because of this, how diffuse the problems seem to be, as I was saying a moment ago. Just like there seems to be so many wrong things. So there's this, there's this ongoing trauma that people are living with of September 11th, but there's also like there don't seem to be any good solutions, which is also a problem. Right? Like in some ways, yeah, we can't really wash the trauma out, the history of what happened. But if we could, would that be good either? It doesn't seem like it. Jeroen?
Yeah, maybe that's why the line of allergic to perfumes now is in there as some kind of statement about not getting you're not able to make everything clean and whole and beautiful again.
Right, and you can just keep on dumping detergent on your clothes, which are full of dust, and you know, maybe you'll wash it out, but you'll also develop an allergy to the amount of perfume, right? Or like artificial whatever is you're using to clean. Michael, and then CJ, were you putting your hand up or no? Michael, go ahead.
I was just going to say about the pessimism is I was thinking when I was reading the poem about the idiom airing out your dirty laundry, and about maybe that it's just that's the thing of writing, you know, that she's going through, and in that way to go way back to what Jenny was saying before about the personal nature of this poem and why it hits it in a different way to the Ginsberg one is that it's doing that process of writing, even though maybe there isn't much hope because there's these new problems that didn't exist back when Ginsberg wrote the original. But it's the same thing as you're saying now, Max, about dumping. It's like, here's some more problems, you know, that are still unresolved, but we're going to write about them anyway. And in that sense, it ties into the ending of the poem. She's done her process of writing the poem, and it's all okay now. But just from the perspective of writing, not actually solving the problem and pessimistic.
That's I think that there's some recognition and a kind of proliferation of problems that's happening. CJ, did I see your hand up for a second?
I did. I remembered what I wanted to say. I think it's perhaps even generational, but certainly for people in New York, cohesive PTSD that can never be cleaned.
Right.
That I'm not like, can I get myself clean or can I get my clothes clean? But I'll never get my mind clean. It's always hanging there like a trauma.
I think that's, I mean, that seems to probably be part of her project in this poem and potentially in this collection, September 12th. is to talk about exactly this very specific New York experience of having been there on the day of the attacks and the chaos of the aftermath. I want to go back to where you were saying, Michael, about how this differs from the Ginsberg poem, and to kind of dwell a little bit more with this pessimism, which also seems in some ways to be related to this kind of like existential situation that you just talked about, CJ. And I guess like I think. So I asked like what the problem of this poem is, like what problem it's diagnosing. And I think maybe another way of asking that is to what extent is this an ecological poem compared to the Ginsberg? And does anybody have any thoughts on how she's engaging with the question of the ecology, which is the central theme of the Ginsberg poem? And here it's not as clear. It's far more direct. It's the disaster that she's writing about is September 11th. So what is, what's the status of the ecology in this poem? Vijaya?
She might not be addressing ecology directly, but I think she's actually more grounded in the homework, because she doesn't go, I mean, she's just talking of a specific location and place. So this is like, Ginsberg is all over the world,
Yeah.
She's because 9/11 was what brought the whole world down on America's heads, on the heads of Americans. Right? It was like focused. I mean, that, because, I mean, and people, you won't believe me, I went to India, and people who are hardly educated, don't even know too much about anything, would talk to me like, kind of, America is the root of all problems, kind of thing, and, they would not talk, they would not know half the things, but people give sweeping statements like that. So I think 9/11 was a time when, I mean, so much happened, kind of, so much changed, for how everybody started looking at, I mean, I think there was like more self-reflection, which began at that point, more inward looking things beginning at that point. That's what I feel.
So if we're to extrapolate almost like an ecological reading of that, there's something along the lines of the Americans coming to reckon with the position of the United States in affecting the world. So other people in other countries, or also just like the globe, like as the environment, like the entire world. What does and there's so much like statistics about this, right? About the consumption of energy and fuel and who the major contributors to emissions are, and it's it's the United States, and it's other it tends to be other major Western countries.
And I liked her particular use of the word conglomerate. It's like, I mean, she's just not, she's talking about a very huge corporation which is stretched all over the world, kind of a huge corporation, right?
Yeah, conglomerate is an interesting word, isn't it?
Yeah, that's an interesting word that she doesn't use corporation, she uses conglomerate. So it's like, I don't know. I feel that she is kind of addressing, but she's making it more kind of inward looking, kind of like in that sense.
Jeroen and then Kurt, and then we'll start to wrap this up.
I was reading the Ginsberg poem more as a political poem than an ecological poem, actually.
Okay.
Because it starts out with what was it? Dirty Iran.
Yeah, right.
So that was the way I read the whole poem, more like the way the United States works or influences the rest of the world. And then with 9/11, the rest of the world enters the United States in a rather dramatic way. So that was my idea of the answer to Ginsberg.
It's also, well, go ahead, Kurt.
Just a small thing. I was very struck by Load of Hope that Michael sort of brought up in response to the concept of pessimism, but doesn't it sound like, isn't it sort of a rhyme with load of shit? I mean, because you sort of hear it, because you don't usually see a load of something.
Yeah, you don't see load of hope. Yeah, right, too.
So it's almost like it's like the irony is inherent in that. It's the only two things you use load of for, and here they invented this load of hope.
Yeah,
it feels cheap. It feels artificial. Which,
yeah, I mean, that's a good point, and it starts to call into question how innovative this marketing campaign really is.
Yeah.
I mean, it might be, it's sort of innovative, like on the ground in terms of what it's doing, but perhaps it could use a little bit more reflection on the name. Jenny, did I see your hand? Or?
You did. Can I just say two quick things? One of them is thank you, everybody, for making me see how much more there was in this poem than I knew there was. And secondly, the book that I mentioned on the note, Silence of Abandonment, is particularly interesting because it looks at, I can't remember, 10 or 12 hugely polluted sites across the world that we've never cleaned up, but in which nature is managing to grow in small ways. And it's so unusual to have a book about ecological disasters which shows something positive in the natural world that I think it's really worth reading.
Thank you.
You posted this in the chat, right?
I posted it in the chat for the other poem. I've got
And
my
what
book
was-
reading
Islands.
What was the title? What was the title of the book?
Islands of Abandonment, Carl Flynn.
Islands. Islands of
Islands of
Abandonment.
Oh, did I mistype? Probably.
No, it's right. Oh, cool. Yeah, I'm getting it here. Cool. Yeah, this was. Does anybody have any like final thought here? Well, first of all, thank you, Jenny, so much for suggesting this poem. That first and foremost, thank you so much for sending this to me last month and asking for us to do this. I think this was this made for a fun session where we could talk a little bit about a little bit about Ginsberg, a little bit about a poem that's like really new, it's like just a month old, and a little bit about eco poetics in a sort of like loose way. But I think that was a cool like direction for us to take here. Mark, did I see your hand a moment ago?
Yes, I was wondering about the form. What is it? Is it really a poem? Does it have to be a poem? I mean, it could be a prose text. So why the line breaks? But you have these wonderful tacits that struck me, but they aren't really regular. Why didn't she have them regular? Because she is so angry about what happened at 9/11, and so she cannot really concentrate on the lines and have perfect line breaks. But these tacits, it took a while until Dante's Inferno, the Divine Comedy, came to my mind, which is also written in tacits, and probably that's also what she has in mind, and she is describing hell on earth, right?
That's a great reading of the tercet form, Mark, which is otherwise, you're right. I mean, this is a prose piece. It's so we should understand the division into tercets as a gesture of some kind, and I think that this reading of it back onto the Inferno is quite inspired. I think that's perhaps what we are supposed to understand here, that this is a sort of like Dantean, a sort of homage to Dante, or rather, yeah, I think as you said, like saying, you know, this is the inferno, this is hell. It's this whole state of affairs. It's not just the September 11th attacks. It's not just Hurricane Katrina or the tornado that rips through Joplin, but it's also the Tide Corporation taking advantage of people's misery to offer what appears to be some sort of benevolent service, but we all understand to be just a way to boost the Tide brand. And also it's the people who are skeptical of this, nevertheless, you know, wishing that they had access to it. It's this whole systemic state of affairs that's kind of infernal. Well, thanks everyone. This was a really great session. Yeah, I agree with you, Stanley. Thanks for posting this in the chat. It's been a really good gathering. And it's always a pleasure. And again, thanks Jenny for this poem, and thanks to all of you for tuning in today on this Saturday. For some of you, it's still pretty early in the morning. And for some of us, it's the end of the day.
Thank you, Max, for the Ginsberg, which I'd never read.
Max.
Oh yeah, no, my pleasure. I mean, your suggestion, Jenny, is what made me think of it. I mean, it's always, whenever a poet's writing about another poem, it's fun to put them side by side. It makes for a productive discussion. Well, thanks everyone. We're going to meet again on the 29th, I believe, of October, and I'm not sure yet what we want to read, but if anybody has any ideas or wants to send something to me in the next few weeks, please do. And we can, even if it's just like one poem, and we can put that on the schedule for the end of October.
And what time, Max?
It'll be at the same time, but I don't know.
Psych myself.
Sorry?
I can psych myself, or just stay up all night.
It'll be, wait, are you on the West Coast, CJ?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm a night person.
It will be the same time, but I believe that Europe reverts to standard time before the United States. So there's going to be, I can't think of what that means for you right now, but just stay, I'll be sure to include like a Greenwich Mean Time note, and then you can look it up to see what that is for you currently on Pacific Daylight Time.
That's a load of hope. You gotta wake up.
I'm pretty sure I don't know if anybody knows, but I think by then either, or maybe it's that weekend. Maybe we'll still be.
It's that weekend.
We will still be on summertime on Saturday, October. Okay, so never mind. It'll be the same time then as no.
And tomorrow is a huge full moon, so enjoy it.
The moon's been wild here. It's so low in the sky. I don't know if anybody else has noticed it here on this latitude. Great. Yeah. Enjoy the beer, Jeroen, and the Zappa records, and
will do.
Take care, everyone, and see you soon.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye-bye.